proper there. So I started calling the city statistician once a week. And then in April of '88, he said, yeah, we think it's $250,000. So
In a shocking turn of events, Rick Harrison, the beloved star of Pawn Stars, has seen his fate sealed. After years of building an empire based on charm, business savvy, and rare collectibles, the reality TV mogul now faces the consequences of his past actions. Allegations of shady deals, ethical lapses, and betrayal from those closest to him have led to a final sentence that changes everything. The public's adoration has turned to disbelief as the pawnshop king bids farewell to his reign. This is the moment when Rick Harrison's empire collapses. Goodbye forever. The rise of Rick Harrison, from pawnshop to global fame. Rick Harrison, the patriarch of the iconic reality show Pawn Stars, built an empire from the ground up. What began as a modest pawnshop in Las Vegas eventually grew into a global phenomenon, bringing rare artifacts, historical treasures, and jaw-dropping negotiations to millions of homes across the world. His sharp business acumen, laid-back demeanor, and charismatic charm quickly made him a household name. With a steady presence in the television world, Rick Harrison became synonymous with smart deals, quick wit, and a wealth of historical knowledge. For years, his reputation was that of a man who had it all: wealth, fame, and the ability to turn the simplest of transactions into high-stakes drama. The Pawn Stars franchise was a goldmine. It offered a window into the world of historical collectibles, antiques, and rare items. The show thrived on the interaction between Rick, his son Corey, and their team of experts, who together ran the family business, the world-famous gold and silver pawn shop in Las Vegas. Over time, Pawn Stars became one of the most watched and beloved reality shows, drawing millions of viewers eager to see what valuable or quirky item would walk through the shop doors next. Rick's business strategy, built around the buying and selling of unique items, turned the pawn shop into a lucrative venture, attracting collectors, enthusiasts, and casual fans alike. He was portrayed as the quintessential businessman, shrewd, knowledgeable, and always one step ahead. But beneath this polished, charismatic exterior, there were darker forces at play. The cracks beneath the surface, a tarnished legacy. While Pawn Stars dazzled viewers with dramatic bids and seemingly effortless negotiations, the truth about Rick Harrison's business dealings started to unravel over time. The carefully constructed public persona of a savvy businessman and family man was just that, an image. The success of the show was not just based on honest transactions and historical value, it was also rooted in a carefully curated spectacle. And as with any empire built on such a foundation, cracks started to show. Behind the scenes, Rick's business practices were more questionable than fans could have imagined. Allegations of shady deals, manipulative business tactics, and murky partnerships began to surface. There were whispers about Rick's interactions with individuals of questionable integrity. His professional alliances, once seen as a testament to his ability to network and build relationships, began to look more like a house of cards held together by less than reputable figures. As the years passed, Rick became more involved in high-stakes negotiations that blurred the lines between right and wrong. Some of the individuals involved in these deals were not always the kind of people you'd expect to associate with a successful family-run business. As Rick's wealth and influence grew, so did his appetite for risk. And while this ambition helped him achieve greater success, it also planted the seeds of his eventual downfall. His growing network of business associates included individuals with dubious reputations, people who had little regard for ethical boundaries, and were often willing to do whatever it took to make a deal. The once loyal employees, friends, and partners who had helped build his empire began to distance themselves, their loyalty tested by Rick's increasingly questionable choices. Old business deals, once thought to be successful, were now being viewed as examples of manipulation and exploitation. Rick's growing involvement with these unsavory characters and shady deals raised concerns among those who had worked with him. These concerns were often dismissed by Rick as rumors or misunderstandings. However, they couldn't be ignored for long. The walls were starting to close in on him, and the consequences of his past actions would soon become impossible to ignore. A fall from grace. The public backlash. The ultimate breaking point for Rick Harrison came when the public began to catch wind of the truth. For years, fans had tuned in to Pawn Stars, enamored with the drama and the excitement of seeing rare treasures evaluated and traded. But as the scandalous truths about Rick's business dealings and personal life began to surface, viewers were forced to reckon with a reality they hadn't expected. The once untouchable businessman, who had spent years on television selling everything from old comic books to rare Warhol paintings, found himself embroiled in legal battles that would shake the very foundation of his empire. Rumors of financial mismanagement, insider trading, and fraudulent deals spread like wildfire. As these allegations became more credible, Rick's carefully constructed image of the cool, collected, and trustworthy patriarch began to disintegrate. The world watched as Rick, once the king of the pawnshop industry, stood in a courtroom facing a judge who would determine his fate. The charges against him were severe and numerous, ranging from fraud to tax evasion to questionable business practices. His legal team fought hard to defend him, but the mounting evidence against him was overwhelming. The public's opinion had already shifted, and no amount of charm or quick-witted negotiations could turn the tide. For Rick, the trial was not just a legal battle, it was the end of an era. Fans who had followed his career for years were shocked and disillusioned. They had watched him make deals on television with ease, only to realize that the deals in his real life were much darker. The empire he had built with such confidence was now crumbling, and with it, so was the trust that had once been placed in him. A legacy built on lies, the expose of Rick Harrison's empire. As Rick's legal troubles deepened, the stories about his business dealings began to take center stage. What once seemed like savvy negotiations and masterful business moves were now being viewed through a much darker lens. The pawnshop empire Rick had built was not as solid as it appeared. The cracks, once invisible to the public eye, had now become gaping holes, threatening to bring down everything he had worked for. The real drama, it seemed, had never been on the screen. It had been happening behind the scenes all along. As ex-employees and business partners came forward with their accounts, the truth about Rick's rise to power and the people he had aligned himself with became clear. The deals that had made Rick a star on Pawn Stars were often held together by fragile threads, unethical partnerships, manipulative tactics, and shady alliances that left many in the wake of his success feeling betrayed. Some of Rick's business decisions had been downright reckless. He had surrounded himself with individuals who cared more about their own interests than the reputation of the pawnshop or the well-being of its employees. These toxic relationships would ultimately prove to be his undoing. The empire he had built with so much ambition was now teetering on the brink of collapse, its foundation weakened by years of mismanagement and questionable choices. The legal consequences of these actions were inevitable. As Rick's world unraveled, he was forced to face the fact that his empire was built on a shaky foundation. The same quick deals, once celebrated on television, were now under investigation, and the consequences were severe. Rick was no longer the star of Pawn Stars. He was the central figure in a scandal that would forever change the way people viewed him. The sentence, a turning point in Rick Harrison's life. When the day of the sentencing arrived, Rick Harrison's fate was sealed. The man who had once been a celebrated businessman and beloved television personality now stood in front of a judge, facing the consequences of his actions. The sentence was a harsh reminder of the cost of greed, manipulation, and unethical behavior. For Rick, the sentence was more than just a legal outcome. It was the end of a career. The world that had once cheered him on as he made deals on television was now watching as he faced the reality of his mistakes. The sentence wasn't just a punishment, it was the final nail in the coffin of the Pawn Stars empire. The once flourishing pawnshop business, once a global sensation, now appeared to be on the brink of extinction. The empire Rick had worked so hard to build had come crashing down, not due to the economy or external factors, but because of his own actions. The show, which had once captivated millions, was now in decline. The empire he had built on quick deals and dramatic TV moments was now crumbling under the weight of its own contradictions. Rick Harrison's downfall was a cautionary tale, a reminder that no amount of fame, fortune, or success can protect you from the consequences of your choices. His legacy, once seen as that of a savvy businessman who had built an empire, would now be forever tainted by the dark truths that had come to light. For the millions of fans who had followed his journey, it was a bitter pill to swallow. Rick Harrison's empire was gone, and there was no going back. The unraveling of Rick Harrison, from pawnshop king to pariah. Rick Harrison, once a beloved and admired figure, found himself at the center of an unfolding disaster that would irrevocably alter his life and legacy. For years, Rick had been the face of Pawn Stars, a show that was synonymous with rare treasures, behind-the-scenes negotiations, and the allure of discovering lost history. As the patriarch of the world-famous gold and silver pawnshop, Rick had established himself as an expert in the world of antiques, collectibles, and business. However, behind the scenes, cracks in his personal and professional life had been forming for years, leading to a public reckoning that no one saw coming. The public's perception of Rick had always been that of a savvy businessman with a sharp mind and a friendly demeanor. He built a reputation as someone who could strike a deal with just about anyone, all while remaining composed and charismatic in front of the cameras. His show, Pawn Stars, had become a global sensation, showcasing the world of pawn shops and rare collectibles in a way that had never been done before. What fans didn't realize was that the image of Rick Harrison they saw on screen was a carefully crafted persona, a man of integrity who was both knowledgeable and trustworthy. But as the days wore on and the accusations mounted, it became clear that this persona was not only an illusion, it was a facade, a mask that had successfully concealed the reality of his personal and professional dealings for far too long. Rick Harrison's empire, built on the foundation of quick deals and charming negotiations, was crumbling, and the truth was becoming harder to ignore. The price of fame. A double-edged sword. Rick Harrison's fame came with its fair share of rewards, a sprawling business empire, global recognition, and a lavish lifestyle that most could only dream of. He had lived the American dream, rising from humble beginnings to achieve wealth, influence, and a level of celebrity that most people would envy. But with this fame came an insidious price, one that Rick would ultimately be unable to afford. Fame had brought him luxuries and privileges, but it also brought expectations. As the face of Pawn Stars, Rick had become a symbol of the American entrepreneurial spirit, an embodiment of hard work, knowledge, and charm. Fans flocked to his pawn shop to see the man behind the TV persona and to catch a glimpse of the treasures he so expertly evaluated on screen. What many didn't realize was that Rick's rise to fame had been punctuated by a series of ethical lapses, questionable business practices, and moral compromises that were beginning to catch up with him. For years, Rick had taken his loyalty and reputation for granted. He had built an empire based on the trust of his employees, business partners, and fans. But as time went on, that trust began to erode. The loyalty that had once been a cornerstone of his success quickly evaporated, leaving Rick exposed and vulnerable. The very people who had helped him rise to the top, his friends, family, and colleagues, were now among the first to turn on him, exposing the darker truths that had been hidden behind the gleaming surface of Pawn Stars. The betrayal, a close ally, turns against him. As the walls closed in around Rick, one of his closest allies made a stunning move that would change everything. In a shocking twist, someone who had been with him for years, someone who had shared in his successes and supported him through his struggles, chose to reveal some of Rick's darkest secrets. This revelation was the final blow to Rick's carefully constructed world. The betrayal came from an individual who had worked side by side with Rick for years, someone who had been privy to the inner workings of the pawn shop, as well as the dealings that went on behind closed doors. This person, once considered a loyal confidant, stepped forward to share the details of Rick's unethical business practices, personal failings, and questionable decisions. It was a betrayal that Rick had not seen coming, and it left him isolated and defenseless. The impact of this betrayal was twofold. Not only did it destroy Rick's public image, but it also shattered his personal relationships. The man who had once been a mentor, a boss, and a friend was now exposed for the person he truly was, someone whose empire had been built on manipulation, lies, and questionable dealings. This revelation set off a cascade of events that would lead to Rick's eventual downfall, leaving him without the support of those who had once stood by him. The hidden truths behind the pawnshop empire. For years, Rick had carefully curated the public image of the world-famous gold and silver pawnshop. To the outside world, it was a treasure trove of history, a place where people could walk in with family heirlooms or rare artifacts and walk out with life-changing sums of money. The pawnshop, and by extension Rick Harisson, had become a symbol of success, an example of what could be achieved through hard work, knowledge, and a knack for negotiation. However, the reality of the pawnshop empire was far different. Behind the polished image, there were constant rumors of shady business practices, questionable deals, and conflicts of interest that Rick had worked hard to keep hidden. As the years went on, the cracks in his empire grew wider, and eventually they began to show. Allegations of insider trading, fraud, and using his celebrity for personal gain started to surface, and with each new revelation, the illusion of the pawnshop king began to fade. While Rick had always portrayed himself as a savvy businessman who had built his fortune from nothing, the truth was far more complicated. His success had been built not just on negotiation skills and historical knowledge, but also on unethical practices that would ultimately tarnish his reputation. From shady real estate deals to allegations of exploiting vulnerable people for personal gain, the empire Rick had built on Pawn Stars was revealed to be a fragile house of cards, held together by a series of questionable decisions and morally dubious relationships. The impact of betrayal on the public image. As the public began to learn the truth about Rick Harrison's dealings, the backlash was swift and unforgiving. Fans who had once adored him for his wit, charm, and business acumen began to feel betrayed. The very qualities that had made Rick a star were now the same ones that exposed his true nature. His business practices, which had once seemed clever and savvy, were now being viewed as manipulative and exploitative. The media played a significant role in amplifying the backlash. Tabloids and news outlets eagerly reported every new piece of information that came to light, and the public's anger grew with each revelation. Social media platforms were flooded with comments from fans expressing their disappointment, frustration, and disillusionment. People began to question how someone who had built such an empire could have been so careless, so willing to betray the trust of his employees, business partners, and fans. What had once been a beloved television show, featuring Rick Harisson as the charismatic star, was now tainted by the truth. The Pawn Stars franchise, which had been built on the idea of honest deals and rare treasures, was now seen as a stage for manipulation, greed, and exploitation. The show that had made Rick Harisson a household name was now the backdrop for his downfall, as the world watched in disbelief as the man they had trusted fell from grace. The end of an era. Rick Harrison's personal and professional collapse. Rick Harrison's fall from grace was not just a professional failure, it was a deeply personal tragedy. For someone who had spent his life in the spotlight, the loss of public trust was a devastating blow to his identity. He had built his career on being a likable, knowledgeable figure who could navigate the complexities of business with ease. But when the truth came to light, that persona crumbled, and with it so did Rick's sense of self. The public's anger was not just about his business dealings, it was a reflection of a broader disillusionment with celebrity culture. Fans were no longer willing to look the other way when it came to the flaws of their idols. The backlash against Rick Harrisson was part of a larger conversation about the dangers of fame and the reality that no one, no matter how charming or influential, could escape the consequences of their actions. As Rick's empire crumbled, so did the loyalty of those who had once stood by him. His team, once seen as a close-knit group of individuals who shared in his success, began to distance themselves from him in a very public way. Former allies spoke out against him, and former friends became his most vocal critics. The betrayal that had once been a private matter was now being played out on a global stage, and Rick found himself isolated, with few people left to defend him.